I've taken a break from watching anime to bring you this very special program. Why non-GMO actually is GMO, and why organic actually is GMO. For those who didn't know, organic is supposedly non-GMO by default, but it's not. So here's the official definition of GMOs as set out in the United States by the United States Department of Agriculture. Something along the lines of created by directly manipulating an organism's genetic material in a laboratory setting. So they're being genetically modified, like CRISPR, genetic mutation, and stuff like that. But what they don't tell you is that what's really going on in pretty much every single thing we eat, and the list of things that have been non-hybridized, non-artificially bred is so short you could probably count it on two hands. So this video doesn't have many actionable protocols, it's more of an FYI. So what's really going on is selective or artificial breeding, which is the natural crossing of plants with desirable traits to enhance or introduce specific characteristics. And I'll go through some of these in more detail in just a minute here. So, when you're buying whole foods, you think you're making a good choice, and you are because that's the best choice you can make. Like fruits, or organic fruits, even grains, possibly even some organic grains. Actually, almost all organic grains, unless you're going for stuff like einkorn or spelt, which has never been crossbred, hybridized, or genetically modified, or selectively bred. Um, the stuff you're buying, which is organic and whole foods and stuff, it's been artificially bred for thousands of generations, possibly tens of thousands of generations. And the genetic makeup of these whole foods is not even close to their native wild ancestors of the foods, of course. And why does this matter? So this is not in the scope of this video, but humans cannot evolve fast enough for our digestive system to adapt to radical artificial breeding changes. You'll see in just a minute some examples of how plants used to be back in the Neolithic, Mesolithic eras. We were exactly the same. Back in the days of the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Stone Age, our bodies were exactly the same. We have not evolved since that time. But our food drastically has, and that's the main driver of chronic disease, non-chronic disease, acute things like cancer, etc., etc. But that's a different video. Oops. So why are they selectively breeding all this stuff? Well, when you think about it for 2 minutes, it becomes pretty obvious. Profit, first of all, they need a greater yield per plant. They, meaning the farmers. So when they're growing fruit, they need every single fruit tree or root or vine or however that respective fruit grows to yield more actual fruit, more units. When you're growing wheat, you need the wheat plant to yield more kernels for the bread, etc. Along the same lines, you need each yield unit, aka each mango or something like that, to be larger in size. That's a desirable trait for the consumer, of course. Additionally, you breed for desirable traits such as sweetness and fruit. Believe it or not, the original versions of fruit, the wild versions, they weren't very sweet at all. If anything, they tasted kind of bad. Things like seedless when it comes to watermelon. You buy an organic seedless watermelon, how can it possibly be non-GMO? And you'll see another example of things that are seedless which used to have seeds, which you may be surprised by. These plants need to be pesticide resistant in order to be most efficient for the farmers. When it comes to fruit especially, the bugs eat it. There's really nothing you could do about it. Even the local organic farmers markets have to use some array of pesticides to keep the bugs from eating it. So you breed for pesticide resistance. The plants that are most resistant to pesticide will be artificially bred so that the whole entire crop, the whole entire yield, will be able to take a beating from the pesticides and still grow. And you'll eat that. Fertilizer response, the plants that are most responsive to the fertilizers used, like ammonium nitrate and things like that, will be crossbred artificially so that every single plant can be more responsive to fertilizer, again generating more units, more profit. Each plant to require less nutrients and sustenance in general. The farmers use things like certain sprays and certain additives that gives the plant nutrients to grow, and if the plant requires less of that and still grows the same, that's a desirable trait that they breed for. Growing season and growing speed, you want the plant to kind of be on an exact timeline when it grows. You want it to be very predictable, and you want it to basically grow at the speed which you desire. So you breed for that. And each plant to take up less space. So when you're planting a bunch of crops in a line, you kind of want it to go straight up, I guess, so it takes up less space while still yielding large units of fruit or kernels or whatever, and more of them as well. And these are just some reasons I came up with off the top of my head. Some I know for sure, some are just intuitive, but that's kind of why they do it. And now to bring it all to life, let me move this here. We have some examples of what artificial breeding has done. So we do know that most corn today is GMO. Of course, they don't even try to hide it. But even the organic corn, organic has to be non-GMO according to the United States. Look what it used to be. Corn used to be a grass, believe it or not. You can eat it, but it was a grass, and it was called teosinte or teosint. And over the course of about 7 to 10,000 years, it's turned into modern corn. And GMOs are a recent thing, but most of that, thousands of years of that, was just artificial breeding. And if us as humans, our digestive system stayed the same since the time of teosint, and now we're up to modern corn, what kind of effect do you think that has on the gut? It's a totally foreign object. It could be treated as an intruder, with all the downstream effects that come with that. If you look down here, bananas used to have seeds, like every fruit. That's what a fruit is. Fruits have seeds, and they used to be a lot smaller as well. You can't really see it in this picture. Who's actually ever seen a banana with seeds? But the bananas you buy are organic, so they must be non-GMO. And we have a really good article over here. Let me exit this view so I could copy it over. We can kind of go through this. It has some good examples just to bring it to life. This is what the article is called if you want to read about it. Here's what 9,000 years of crossbreeding has done to corn, peaches, and other crops. Oops. So take a look at corn. Let me do this. Oops. Take a look at corn. Natural corn. Oh my god. Back in 7000 BC was a 19 millimeter long grass. Peel it by hammering repeatedly with a hard object, blah blah blah. It tastes very dry like raw potato. Basically, it's not edible. You could eat it, but you're not gonna get any joy out of it. And of course, we know today's corn. We know what it looks like. It is a far cry from wild corn. Again, keeping in mind that while the corn has evolved to the point where it's completely unrecognizable, us as humans have not evolved at all since 7000 BC. Besides being taller and more well nourished and healthier in general now, we are the same. We used to be shorter, malnourished, smaller back then, for obvious reasons, but 7th millennium BC, Mesopotamia, yeah, let's keep going. Watermelon used to be 50 millimeters long. You have to open it with a hammer. There's an extremely bitter taste. This is a common theme. Wild fruit didn't taste good. Wild native fruit, I mean, not really wild fruit that you find today. And of course, we all know the watermelons of today. They're massive, they're mostly seedless, unless you're buying the seeded ones, which most people don't do. Peaches, same story. Waxy skin, 36% stone. I guess it does taste kind of better. Earthy, sweet, sour, but of course, we all know today's peaches. Very juicy, very sweet. Who doesn't love them? But again, over the course of 6,000 years, peaches have evolved to become something unrecognizable, while human beings and our digestive systems have not evolved at all. And those are just some examples. So, in the next video scope, or sometime soon, I do want to go through this. Oops, what the fuck? I want to review how these organic, quote unquote, yet very GMO foods damage our digestive system because we have not evolved fast enough, nearly fast enough, to adapt to them.